From a steady background in analysis on brand integrity and value, Stephen is now CEO of the Centre of Brand Analysis, who produce the renowned Super Brands and Cool Brands annual surveys. Stephen is the leading commentator on brand and an expert in the production of brand study. So please welcome to the stage Stephen Cheliotis. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, nice to be here. I'm not going to be up here on my own. This is a panel discussion, of course. So what I'm going to do is introduce my fellow panelists. However, what we're going to do after that is, after I've said a little bit of the scene, we're going to have a chat amongst ourselves, actually. We're going to ask you to also have a chat amongst yourselves, and then we're all going to come together and hopefully have a joint conversation. Now, I know for the English people in the room, you're probably sitting there squirming, going, oh my God, have we got to talk to someone? This is going to be horrible and bad, especially if I don't know the person. For the Americans, this will be very natural. But let's give it a go, because we've had a lot of speakers today. We've had a lot of great insights, a lot of information to download, and it's now about 12:30, I think. So let's try and sort of liven up and hopefully talk not only between the audience and the panel, but also between yourselves and between the panelists. So firstly, to enable that to happen, I need my fellow panelists. So we have Chris Morris. He is the Managing Director of the Late Rooms Group, which I'm sure many of you will know very well. It's obviously growing very quickly. In Asia, it's of course Asia Rooms, and of course we've also got the niche London site, hotel-london.co.uk. Very different from Late Rooms, we have Joe Hill, who's the Director of Interactive Marketing across Europe, Middle East and Africa for the InterContinental Hotel Group, which, she didn't even tell me this, I'm such a geek, I knew this, is the largest hotel group in the world by rooms. So we have Joe from a very different business, so we have small business, large business, and then finally completing our Holy Trinity, hopefully today, is Neil Dunn, who is the Managing Director of Saatchi and Saatchi S. Now, that extra S isn't a mistake. It's a division of Saatchi which brings together not only Saatchi and Saatchi is obviously excellent advertising, but also consultancy and trying to understand the power of, I think, social, and you can correct me when we come up here if I get this wrong, but the power of social media and conversations to transform individuals' lives and indeed our norms and behaviours. So panellists, if you wouldn't mind coming up and joining me, that'd be great. Thank you. While they're taking their seats, I am going to set the context just very, very quickly. I want this to be about conversation, so I don't want to just speak at you. Already this morning we've heard a lot of things. We've heard about 25 million users on Facebook. We've heard from Google about the fact internally they want ideas to come from everywhere and people to engage with them. We've also heard, of course, even this morning from Charles Ledbetter about the growth of brands that are engaging in social and conversations and so forth. Now, at the moment, we know that most of the research out there in the world of marketing says social is important, advocacy is important, word of mouth is important, what people say about your brand is important. They might even say which are the most influential groups. What they don't do is necessarily say who's talking about what, what's motivating them to talk, how does it differ depending on what stage of life they're in, whether they've got kids or haven't got kids, how stressed they are. What are we actually talking about? Now, we're at the Centre for Brand Analysis at the moment. This is my only plug, and then we're going to move on. But we are doing a big project at the moment called Talkonomics. And really what we're trying to do, and we have been trying to do for the last 4.5, 5 months, is understand those questions so that we as marketeers, or indeed business leaders, can understand how to engage in those conversations, not only just online, but also offline. Now, that research is not yet completed. I can tell you thus far that we know there are huge amounts of conversations going on. So not only is it important, but there's a lot of it happening. We can tell you we've found some fascinating bits of information, but again, I can't give you the results. So instead, we're going to do a little bit of our own research here and now. This is the interactive part. Right. What I would like people to do, to those around them, left, right, doesn't matter, let's cause a little bit of chaos, let's see how it works out, is just talk about some brands. Maybe one that you absolutely love. Why do you love it? What's it doing? Why would you recommend it to the person next to you? Equally and bravely, and please do look at the badges of the person next to you before you do this, just tell them about a brand you hate. Why do you hate it? What's it done to you? Why don't you want them to use that brand? So if we can do that for a few minutes, we're going to do exactly the same up here, hopefully with our mics off during that period. Let's just engage and let's do that. And then when we've finished that, I'm going to try and quieten you down in a couple of minutes. We're going to start off by telling you about what we think, and then hopefully you can tell us a little bit about what you think, and from that we can get lots of questions related to brands. Brands in conversation, building brands, engaging with brands, creating awareness, all of these things that are often driven by conversations. So, as I say, the Americans, this will be natural. For the British, try hard, you can do it, grin and bear it, it'll be fine. So, 2 or 3 minutes, let's go for it. Hopefully you were actually talking about brands, but there was a hell of a lot of noise going on here, which proves that we do get quite enthusiastic about brands. And we obviously had a chat up here as well. Niall, you said Chevron was the hate brand, the brand that you'd go around and slate for its greenwash. You would conversely talk about the Body Shop. Again, it's sort of true belief in ethics. It's not a play. It's not just a bit of veneer. Joe, on the other hand, you went for the retail side of things and shocked the guys amongst the panel here by saying that the brand that she hates and slates is Primark, hating the stores, hating this whole push, yes, buy more stuff, you'll be happy, it's great, but loves a little bit of John Lewis. Well, I've got to go along with Chris on the old Guitar Hero is the brand that he loves. So the fun element that brands can bring into our lives. It was Gibson. Because that was Gibson guitar. It's the same thing, isn't it? It is so not the same thing. Anyway, as a brand expert, it's the same thing. No, it's not. It could not be more. Couldn't be any more different. You're right. And on the flip side, the brand that you did hate though was Guitar Hero. Is that right?
No. Do you want me to give this bit?
Go on then. Go on, Chris.
Yeah, well, I said the brand I love is Gibson guitars, which are heritage guitar. Because when you play them, you just feel all that history. Well, there's great guitars, which I'm not, but behind you have a little bit of magic in the design. And the brand that I hated, I probably won't be alone here, but it's Ryanair. Simply for their kind of commoditisation of travel and kind of the way that they treat you.
I cut that name out of my head, that's why. It kind of just goes in and out.
It may well be Ryanair, I guess, but no, again.
So you can see there's quite a mixture of brands, quite a mixture of reasons why we're talking about brands. And now, of course, the challenge is, well, how do we build brands online? How do we get people to talk about that brand? Is it through showing our sustainability, our compassion? Is it about our overall positioning and what we represent, and indeed what we don't represent in the case of John Lewis versus Primark? Is it the case of fun versus, well, certainly not fun. Again, Ryanair is going to be slated all day, so I think I'm fairly fine in not being picked out on that. But it's probably not fun. So we've got some different things there. Now, I don't know if other people want to share experiences, but also throw in a question at the same time that relates to that experience. Was there any brands that you love, that you hate, that you want to obviously throw out here, but also maybe with a question? We've got our mics there, so if we start over there.
The brand that we spoke about towards the end was Tesco. It's a love-hate relationship. Out of choice, you don't want to shop there, but sometimes necessity pulls you back to the store because of the amount of choice they have.
Okay. And in terms of applying to sort of building a brand online, I mean, do you think that the way that you feel about Tesco, I mean, is there anything you'd like to ask the panel about, you know, how they'd maybe change things or maybe how they'd do things better, whether it's, well, indeed offline or online, but to change your perception and to make you definitely in the firm camp of love, not hate? So I put you on the spot now. Join the panel. Come on up.
Difficult question, actually. I don't think I have a response to it at the moment. I think it's clearly a love-hate relationship. I think that in terms of what they stand for, you wouldn't want to be really associated with a brand, but actually out of choice. The reason I went there at the weekend is pure because of the vast choice, and not dissimilar to Primark. Sometimes it is a case that people ethically don't want to be associated with it, but actually because of the money in the pocket, they actually go there out of necessity. So I don't know.
Okay, can I pull a question out of that, if that's all right? Now, I'm going to maybe do that because it's very difficult to put all of you on the spot, but ethics has kind of come up here, certainly with you, Noel. It's sort of come up or touched upon with you, Joe, in terms of Primark. And I think in Tesco as well, we've got the kind of love-hate. You either think it's the Tesco juggernaut or actually they're doing a good thing for us. They're giving us cheap products. When you're building a brand online, often we think about function and, you know, number of clicks and does this work well. How do you think about things like ethics? How do you think about bringing in these emotive things? I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer on that, Chris.
I think it's quite difficult. I think when you talk about building a brand online, certainly for us, I mean, we're a retailer essentially. So for us, it's about building a brand and then having it online. I mean, you've got to have your brand understood and laid out before you almost take it online. It's different from Google because that exists only online. But, you know, from our point of view, you need to have an offering, you need to have some clarity around what you're trying to sell, you need to have a point of difference. And then you work about how that might operate online, whether that's through SEO, SEM, Facebook, wherever. But you've got to have, before you think about being online as a retailer, for example, you've got to think about what your brand really is, first and foremost. And ethics would form a part of that. From our point of view, there's not an awful lot we can do. We're a web retailer. So from the ethics point of view, the wider community is more difficult. But within our business, we want to make sure that hotels serve what they say they will serve. So the ethics are almost within the purchase, that people get a fair view of what they think they're buying and they're not being hoodwinked by dishonest hoteliers, and there are a few out there. But to make sure you got clear, not from IHG, but you know, you got to make sure you get a clear product out to your customers and they understand what they're buying, and that way you've got to treat people fairly. For us, it's quite difficult to have green ethics outside of the office place. Yeah. But I think from a brand point of view, you've got to know what your brand is before you even think about how you push it out there.
I mean, obviously with you, Joe, most of your brand, well, they do exist offline and then have come online. So how do you sort of show your brand colours and indeed even the ethical side of things with your brand?
Yeah, I'd second that. I think you've got to really understand what your brand's about and then reflect that truly online. And I think customers really easily see through brands that are trying to trick them or tell them there's something they're not. So for us, it's very much about reflecting the different personalities of our brands, which are very different and offer different hotel environments to customers who could be the same customer but might have a different need at that particular point in time. Corporate responsibility is something that we've been looking at a lot as a company. It's not something I'm so close to that I can talk in a lot of detail about it myself, but certainly we have big hotels, they consume a lot of energy. There's a lot of opportunities for us as a business to look at how we can sort of use that to help with green issues and to let our customers know about the benefits of that as well. So there's a lot that we're doing in that area.
I mean, this is something that's very much at your heart. So, I mean, can you give us some examples of how do you go about sort of showing your sustainability, your ethical badge, you know, when you're talking about, you know, something that's
sure, yeah.
so
I
themed,
think just to build
functional.
on the points of Chris and Joe, I think the challenge is that the way we have marketed in the past, the tactics that you know agencies and brands have used have been very much to market at people. And just because you have a set of brand values does not necessarily mean that they resonate with absolutely everybody you try to market to. They're your values, not their values. Everybody has different values. And I think Charles said it this morning when he said that, you know, we need to move away from marketing at people. You know, whether you're a Tesco's, you know, with promises of price and quality and variety and everything else, or whoever, a big B2B brand with the very best high-tech, you know, supply chain solutions or ERP systems. You need to market with people. And I think brands who are beginning to market with people and actually accepting the fact that we don't have all the answers, we don't know what the big challenges are, but we do have values ourselves, but we're really interested in seeing how you would respond to these facts. And we will give you the platforms, we will give you the information that you need to carry some of these things forward. And I think, you know, we're seeing great examples of that with the likes of maybe Pepsi Refresh. You know, Pepsi's not particularly a very sustainable brand in the truest sense of the word. But the Refresh initiative is refreshing so much of social issues across the United States that basically people are deciding. They are deciding what they want that fund. It's ultimately a fund to invest in. It could be rooftop gardens. It could be cleaning up graffiti in communities. It could be some charity that people care about. But the brand is basically providing the investment in the platforms and ultimately benefiting at the back of what that network is responding to. So I think the tactics are fundamentally changing, and I think that's a very, very interesting dynamic.
You say don't talk at people, allow people to talk about you, and obviously that's how we started this whole thing as well. How do you engage, for example, in social networking sites? How do you get involved in Facebook, YouTube, and this obviously is to all of you, without seeming like you are just a big brand invading? I mean, do you get involved in these things, Chris, with late rooms?
We do, and I think the key is absolutely that you don't want to try and use it as a sell channel, because that people switch off at that. I think with Twitter in particular, to be available 24 hours a day when people tweet, they land in a city, they land in a country, they don't know what they're doing, and they can tweet and they can get a response very quickly, and that builds the brand, that brings the value, and you can help, and that becomes something that will lead to advocacy. And similarly with Facebook, I think the worst thing you can do is use it as another direct push medium. You've got to be there to listen, and you've got to be there to help at the point that the customer or potential customer wants that help in a really non-invasive way. They have to be you have to be allowed into their communication, but at that point, you've got a great opportunity to build the kind of relationship which will lead to a loyal customer.
And what about you, Joe? I mean, again, different brands within your portfolio engage more or less? How do they do it sort of subtly and gently? And
yeah, we provide guidelines to our hotels. So we operate predominantly a franchise model. So we encourage our hotels to interact, but we provide guidelines to make it very clear that if you set up a Facebook page, that's not a social media strategy. You've got to have somebody behind it and constantly reviewing it and looking at it and engaging in those conversations to really turn it into something that's of value. So we set guidelines around how hotels could engage in social media depending on how much resource and sort of time they want to put into it. And some of our hotels are more keen than others to maybe do that. At a corporate level, we then also look at some of the ways that we can use social media to engage with our customers, listening and using listening tools to find out what's being said about our different brands, and also to figure out what's resonating with customers, because it might not always be what we think. We're very close to the brands. We think we know what they want, and we think we know how we can frame up the messages, but actually they might be talking about something very different, and can we tap into that? So we address it from both the sort of group level and also then empowering our hotels to be able to use it as they see fit.
Well, that's really important. I mean, I think it's a commitment. There's nothing worse than going to a Facebook page and it's not been updated for a week or a month or a year. I mean, it's a killer. From a brand point of view, I think you're either in that and you manage it all the time and have a constant flow of information, or you step right away. I think the middle ground is the worst place to be.
Yeah. I think realising, the link between online and offline. I think there was a great article in the New Yorker recently. I don't know how many people get the New Yorker, read it, but they generally do have some very, very good journalists. And one of the articles was "The revolution will not be tweeted." And it was just kind of putting forward the concept that, networks are systems of, are hierarchies of very weak ties, that people will not, exhibit loyalty when they're involved in these simple networks. However, hierarchies are systems of much stronger ties. Well, to build on that, we have something else called ecosystems, which if you look at any of the kind of the innovative models, that open source innovation models and so on, where we're using crowdsourcing and things like that, that's going right back to you using ecosystems, where you trust the fact that if you push the information out there into a system where transparency is rife, the innovation will happen, the answers will flow freely. So I think one of the things we talked about social initially, one of the things that we can learn from social movements is, first of all, the limitations of these networks, that they're just enablers, but that if they are aligned with a lot of the principles of social movement theory, and for those of us who are, just to refresh what social movements are, social movements was Obama getting elected to the White House. Social movements was the Age of Enlightenment, the Renaissance. These have been, great platforms for change globally, where we have done phenomenal things, but they've had a couple of common principles. They've always had a higher purpose. You know, whether it was Gandhi, you know, with the pacifist movement, or JFK deciding that they wanted to go to the moon, there was always a higher purpose that inspired people, that kind of created these networks and brought, whether you were the welder, the guy sweeping the floor, or the guy working in Cape Canaveral, you actually related to this and you felt that this was, you know, this was really part of your lifeblood. The other principle is flexibility, that you accept that you don't have the answers, but that you ask the people. And in turn, in asking them, you're actually giving power back to them as well. So you're finding ways to enable the masses and push responsibility out of them.
So a lot of it's about listening as well, though. So it's not about the talking. It's about, I mean, do you use, for example, with the corporate Twitter sites, the Facebook sites, and so forth? I mean, do you use that a bit of market research as well, customer service? I mean, is it all about that as well? Is it about pouring in information from others?
I think insight is one thing. I think that the real thing that, you know, differentiates, you know, leading brands, innovative brands, is, and this is online and offline, is foresight. You know, like whether it's P&G or Unilever or Danone, any of the big businesses who use, you know, real, you know, strenuous insight research techniques, they're all looking at the same data. They're all looking at the same information. You know, it's not a differentiator. What is a differentiator is knowing where the consumer is going to be in 5 years' time, is knowing what generation Y. You know, Henry Ford said, if I listened to my consumer, I would have invented a faster horse. You know, and it's being able to understand what they really want. The subcontext is they want to get out in the great American countryside and discover it very, you know, much easier than they have ever before, and then to innovate around that context as opposed to what you think they're saying.
What about questions from the floor? And I'm not going to pick on you in terms of what brands you spoke about. We did that as the starting point. Is there any questions over there? We've obviously got some mics around. And we do have a stone-faced audience. Well, let's carry on then with that. Really.
We've got a question here.
We have got one here. Great. Have we got a mic near here?
Sorry.
Shall we go here and then?
Shout.
Yeah.
I thought the whole desire versus necessity area was really interesting, and really for me that's about, you know, branding versus you know, treating your brand as a commodity and discounts. And I just wondered that in a recession-led society, which one wins out, basically, talking about your brand or talking about discounts and you know, making it more commoditised.
I think,
Go on, Chris.
I mean, again, we sell hotel rooms and we sell them pretty cheaply. So prices, you know, if you don't have a competitive price, then you are nowhere. But I think the web, more than anything, shows the value of a brand, if you like. If you compare it with retail on the high street, there's a natural inconvenience of a high street where you can find a product in one shop and you may want to price check it with another shop that's half a mile away or another. And I know I've bought things on the high street when I know there's probably a better deal half a mile away, but you're just there. So price is important, but actually there's a convenience factor. If you're shopping for a hotel room or any other kind of product online, you've probably got 5 browsers open. You can see everybody who's selling. A lot of people have the same product. They may even have the same pricing. So at the point of decision, it's all about the brand behind that. And it's made in a snapshot. You don't have the convenience factor of a good place on the high street. You know, you're all there at the same time. So if you don't have the price and the quality, then you've got no chance. But that alone will not be sufficient to make sure you get that sale when the final second comes. And that's all about the brand, people's confidence in you, their clarity about what you're actually selling, trust, reviews, all of those kind of things. And they become the real critical point that actually turns a looker into a booker. But if you don't have the price, you're not even a looker.
I mean, you've got high-end and low-end. Well, I say low-end, more value-based proposition, Joe. So how do you sort of feel about that question?
I think in a recession, you've probably got to look at both. But I think brand is critically important and really helps to communicate the value of what the customer's buying. And I think we've shown that this year. We've relaunched Holiday Inn globally. And at the end of this year, all hotels that we have in our Holiday Inn system will have been refreshed. So there's a new logo, there's a new look and feel, there's some new service elements. And the returns that delivers to the owners who have invested in the refreshed brand, they're making higher profits than the hotels that haven't been transferred over yet. So I think there's a value to the consumer, there's a value to the company and the owner as well of having a brand involved.
And if we just take another question over here as well, there's a gentleman here.
Sorry, am I on?
Yes, you are.
It sounds like, and certainly from the conversation we were having, that reputation, experience, and that's whether that's using a website or actual experience of a product, are now as important as any kind of broadcast brand messages that we've seen before. If a brand does have issue with its perception, you know, real or PR created or whatever it may happen to be, how can it start leveraging social channels to help change that perception? You know, it's easy if you're a new starter, if you're an ASOS, if you're a brand of the social age that has been engaged with clients through social media platforms from day one, that's great. But if you're Coca-Cola or BA, who's not been fundamentally built to have a conversation with anyone, you've been built to ram brand messages down people's throat for the last 80 or 100 years. How does a big corporation make that change, and how does a smaller organisation keep ahead of the game as companies like IHG are rushing and investing in really expensive listening software and employing lots of consultants and lots of other people to kind of catch up and get on the game? So it's quite a long question.
And do you want to take that now? Because obviously you're coming from quite a wide perspective,
Sure.
how brand in crisis or brand that's not delivering maybe overcome some of those problems through social.
The great news is that it's getting easier for SMEs to compete, you know, and do some. I mean, the secret to marketing is, you know, making something personal, making it portable so it can work across any canvas, and also being potent. I mean, when it comes to potency, you know, having that creative idea that can be inspiring can work on all different canvases. We saw some great examples earlier, but there was, for those of you who know the way, let's say that the Super Bowl is like, you know, a hiatus of marketing activity in the US, and when you kind of buy that that half-minute slot at halftime in the Super Bowl, you're all in. You might be putting 20 or 30 of your media spend into that, and of course SMEs can't do that. However, Miller, the brand Miller, had a really good example 2 years ago, where in the weeks up to the Super Bowl, they were just kind of, the idea was basically just a factory worker who was just walking around explaining the technical nuances of how, you know, the levers worked, you know, and how it just got cheaper and cheaper as you got closer to the Super Bowl. And he's explaining this very technical information to his friends who were just not interested. So the ads got shorter and shorter. To the time when it just was at the Super Bowl, he just came up on the camera for about 5 seconds and just went, "High life!" like this, and that was it. But it had been built up, and that, of course, went viral. And very few, you know, kind of initiatives actually do go viral in the end. But if you have something that's really potent, it doesn't matter if you're doing it at the Super Bowl or if you're doing it on YouTube. You know, like the PGA had 1.7 million hits of, you know, 4 or 5 golfers in some glen in Ireland trying to hit a gong in the middle of a lake, you know, recently. You know, so if you have a potent idea, it'll work across all canvases. The barriers to entry are coming down, you know, and SMEs can now compete, you know, with some of the bigger agencies, I think, which is great.
I mean, I think as well, and we'll get that question next year. I mean, I think as well, quickly, just from my perspective, is ultimately a brand has to deliver. Now, whether that's the product, the price, you know, get you to A to B on time, et cetera, it has to deliver. That's the fundamental. If it doesn't, then the marketing veneer, you know, offline, online, it doesn't matter what world you're in, it's going to fail at some point. But obviously, what you can do, hopefully, with social and other things, is at least engage and talk to people.
I think our experience is that, you know, brands need to live what they're talking about, whether it's the service on their website, the service through their Twitter channel, the service through their Facebook, but also in hotels, making sure that the brand is that all the staff in that hotel are living those values. You know, if your mantra is service, when people walk into the hotel, they're getting a personal welcome. If your mantra is value, that you live by a best price promise, whatever it happened to be. But that recalibration of an organisation to actually live that all the way through, to get, you know, human resources, making sure that people understand that we're talking about service, a service culture on our Facebook page, and how does that translate to what the chambermaid says to somebody in a corridor when they see them in the morning. I'm just interested on, I know, how fundamentally the businesses have to shift culture to actually make themselves socially enabled, rather than just marketing through social media channels, which anyone and everyone and their dog is doing at the moment.
But I know what the danger is that people think they can use a social media channel or another channel to change what they really are. I mean, it's no different from having a TV ad or a press ad. If you have a TV ad that says you're this, but actually you're that, it won't work. And you see it online all the time. People have campaigns which look one thing, so they'll drive huge volume to their site, but it won't convert, or it won't do any favours, because when you get there, it's not what you're promising. So social media, it provides a good opportunity to get close to people and to form a relationship, but you still have to be true to what you are, just in the way with any kind of ads, you have to be true to what you are, otherwise it might look great, but it won't deliver what you want, and in fact, it will probably take you backwards.
Yeah, definitely. I think from an IHG perspective, we are a brand company, essentially, and we focus everything around the customer and the brand, but it's the staff in the hotels that live and breathe that brand every day, so it's really essential that they understand the vision, what the company's about, and how they are part of that, and how they contribute to that, and how they work with other people as well to get that across. I think one of the things that's interesting about coming at it from a established company, kind of big company perspective, is if you are a company like that, you probably already have a lot of the structure in place to be able to deal with social pretty easily. So if you have a guest relations team that 20 years ago answered letters and picked up the phone, you can use that team's experience and knowledge to translate what they've been doing and what they're experts at online as well. So I think we certainly look to use the skills that we have within the company across all different channels and medias.
We were chatting about that a bit. Do you want to go ahead?
We are unfortunately out of time, which is always the way. You want to see if the panel takes a while to get going, and then you're out of time. Are you all around over lunch and so forth? So, I mean, we're all here over lunch as well, so you can come and grab us personally and have a direct one-to-one conversation. However, I think there's, again, lots to think about there, but ultimately it is about delivery, which I think the gentleman pointed out rightly. So online doesn't change that fundamental, that's for sure. But hopefully food for thought, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you, Chris, Joe, and Niall. Thank you very much.